Good evening, dear friends. The operational situation at the front by the end of the 12th of February. Let's talk in more detail today. In fact, all over the front, there are a lot of events. We will start with the Skupinsko-Limansky section of the front from Sinkovka. So, on the daytime broadcast, we analyzed one moment on geolinking frames from drones. The Russian troops attacked in the direction of Sinkovka from the west. We did not record any changes in the northwest. At the same time, new shots were also published, which means that the enemy is already on our side. The enemy, with the support of one tank and MTLB, made an attempt to improve the tactical situation along the railway to advance to the southwest. We managed to repel this attack, but as we see, now they are still trying to implement the very plan, when advancing along the forest, would allow them to attack Sinkovka from the flank, not only assault actions head-on. So there was an attack, the attack was repulsed. It's at this point. Therefore, we do not fix any changes, but at the same time we state that the enemy's activity is not only already, as we see, attacking small infantry groups through the forest, but also with the support of at least tracked vehicles, these are tanks and NT, in the amount of 2 units. What does this mean? That they are not going to abandon their plans, and will naturally make further attempts, but most likely they will put the main effort on the forest, an attempt to align the front line along the road, and then a flank attack, as they planned. As for the site, it was added without any changes. In the Limansky direction of Terny-Yampolovka, we also do not record any new changes. Active hostilities continue with varying success. There is also the greatest activity on the part of Russian troops in the area of Yar-Laptev. Attempts are being made to improve the tactical situation, but we do not record any new changes. We are moving to the Bakhmut direction of the northern flank, Bogdanovka. So here, we will discuss a few points. Well, first of all, a gray zone was added instead of a red one. This is the first moment in the area of the Popovsky Forest. The situation is quite difficult. However, it persists in this sector of the front. It means that the enemy published footage of yesterday's attack on the positions of the Ukrainian armed forces. Therefore, with the Popovsky Forest, as we have said, the situation is being clarified. Part of it still remains in the gray zone. So today the situation looks like this. At the same time, again, the Russian troops do not leave attempts to advance in the western direction, in the direction of the city of Chaz Yar. There was a lot of misinformation on the part of the enemy today, enemy resources, about the fact that they have a short distance to the city of Chaz Yar. Well, actually this is true, but the fighting is now going on in the area of the railway station Valerianovka and Popovsky Forest. This is what is actually ahead. Of course, the APU is ready for the fact that the enemy will continue to attack the city of Chaz Yar itself. Defensive structures have been erected, but let's speak frankly as it is. Not always the defensive structures that are claimed, they are in their places. In other words, there is a lot of talk about the fact that we have built such a fortified area there, which cannot be passed. But in fact what is claimed is not. There is a fortified area, but it's still not the same. It's not suitable for a modern type of combat. Taking into account what we already know, we have been stating for at least the last 6 months that the number of air bomb attacks by Russian troops is increasing. We state that the activity of tactical aviation is increasing, and in very many areas of the front. If in the Kherson direction, it was possible to stabilize the situation relatively with this, then in other areas, the situation leaves much to be desired, to put it bluntly. Because aerial bombs were actually designed to destroy concrete fortified areas. Therefore, there is still something to work on. We need to work on this further. There is such a moment. The fighting continues. The second point is the Ivanovo-Kleshivka. The section of the front was also asked to comment because there are a lot of statements. Plus a number of Russian military officers note that Russian troops managed to gain a foothold along one of the forest belts, which means specifically in this area, and allegedly from it they attack Ivanovskoye itself, respectively. If we talk about visual, then we have seen drone footage, geolinking drone footage, visual confirmation, and it is. But artillery attacks in this area, they are really now preparing to storm the settlement again. There has already been one serious assault enough, and they are preparing for a new assault. So there will be a lot of disinformation observed now. Well, actually, if there are any changes, I will let you know. But now, yes, there is an intensive work of artillery on their part, and not assault groups. This is in short. We turn to the Avdeevka direction. It remains extremely difficult for us today. And so, there is a lot now from the enemy. Yesterday we were just talking about that moment, we discussed that there would be a lot of attacks by Russian troops, especially in the near future, which would be distracting, and today they are. Including the fact that resources are reported, not only from the enemy's side, but also from our side, that there were attempts to storm Avdeevka as Sahim again. Well, of course it will be a big word in this case, because all the battles ended at the junction of the red-gray zone. So there was no assault as such. But there was a distracting blow, of course. They wrote that for today, by the evening, there were more than 15 attacks in Avdeevka itself repulsed. That's a lot. That is, the attacking actions were taken by the enemy, Nakitev. But this information was a few hours ago. If we talk about yesterday, there are more than 20 attacks. Now let's look at the situation in the northern part. So, according to the Yagodka Garden Association, we said that there was one moment for clarification there. It means that Russian troops are present in this area. It is divided by streets. This is the first, second street. A red zone has been added. This is what is visually confirmed with the drones, where they moved accordingly from landing and entered this area. Therefore, they are present. Further assault actions are carried out on the Garden Western Dachas, the Garden Association Western Dachas, in the direction of the Brevno complex, or conditionally the intersection of the route 00542 with Industrial Avenue. It is possible to restrain, but in fact, there are also quite a few rolls from the enemy in this area. The fighting is active and continues within the gray zone. Well, the carpool. There are a lot of reports that they are close, they have come close, we talked about it from yesterday to today, changes. Assault operations are being carried out, and the main task for them now is to tighten their reserves as much as possible. I will publish the situation there a little later in my Telegram. I will write a little more about Avdeevka. But there will be more in the south. But one of the fighters, to which I will refer, reports that the situation is very difficult, directly from the ground. Very difficult due to the fact that they have numerical superiority. Therefore, yes, all measures are being taken, drones are involved, but it is extremely difficult when the enemy has fresh reserves that continue assault operations, and he regularly uses them. Therefore, the activity is very high in terms of changes, respectively, the situation before lunch, the situation in the evening. One of the buildings near the carpool is under their control. This is according to a message from the field. Well, the situation is conditional, yes today, because as you understand, it changes several times during the day, including there were reports on the alley of the 50th anniversary of the acts of Avdeevka as Sohim. It means that his opponent has completely taken the remaining houses that are in the gray zone. Then there were reports that along the streets of Lacey Ukrenka, south of the intersection went down. That is, there are a lot of rolls. All these rolls, of course, are repulsed by the APU. Somewhere it is possible to repel, somewhere the enemy has partial success. Well, let's just say that at the moment, we see that his main task is not to expand the existing bridgehead, which we have talked about in this area, because it is enough, namely to interrupt the supply. That is, what they plan to divide, so to speak, Avdeevka into two, that is, north and south. At the same time, according to reports from the field, they managed to transfer armored vehicles from the area of the village of Veselaya. There were reports, among other things, that tanks were even involved. Well, naturally, we expect further visual confirmations. There were reports of armored vehicles, 3 armored vehicles drove in there. There were reports that they actually took assault actions. With the support of armored vehicles, one managed to be destroyed, damaged, one was thrown, one to its original positions. Well, that is, the enemy will use them, and his main task now is to transfer that shock fist, which will take the main assault actions, to Industrial Avenue. Therefore, active hostilities continue, but the situation, I repeat, is very complicated, very complicated. Well, plus, the weather conditions also make their own adjustments. Now in the south of Avdeevka, it means that active hostilities are continuing on the part of the enemy from the area of Opitny. That is, the main task is no longer to advance to the zenith, as we said, but to the Garden Association. As it is called vineyards to or agrochemist, does not matter in this sense. It means that we understand the strike vector to the northeast, because it is the activity in the fields from the Russian troops that is being observed now. Well, the vector, I repeat, is the northeast. That is, it is to cut off the forces of the Zenit and Cheburashka fortified areas in order to interrupt the supply, logistics and replenishment of ammunition provisions. It is clear that this is the main plan of the enemy. Well, assault actions are now also being carried out along the length along the railway, again in the direction of the Garden Association, and an attempt to expand the control zone. The situation remains dynamic, because naturally the APU understands the enemy's mind perfectly. Naturally they take all necessary measures to knock out, not to give a foothold, well in any case, to carry out a number of stabilization measures as far as possible today. But the situation, I repeat, remains extremely difficult, remains in the Avdeevka direction. There is such a moment. I would also like to comment on one more point. Today, the following news was announced on the airwaves, that Russian forces are running out, and offensive actions from the AFU will begin very soon. Look, the fighters from the spot, they know perfectly well all along the front line what the real situation is, they know very well. I will not voice many points. Many fighters themselves voice quite negative news, just so that people understand how difficult it is, what problems there are, and so on, and so on. This is the first moment. The second point is, if there is no ammunition, conditionally there is no help from the United States. It is not so much money that is needed with ammunition, because you will not charge money into the barrel, but if you charge it, it will not be of any use. We need ammunition, their quantity. It's not money that decides, but the amount of ammunition on the battlefield. Therefore, we need to at least stabilize the situation, but to say that the enemy is attrition. See why it has a detrimental effect. Because again, the people relax, and when they relax, and then there are news like Solidar has fallen, and Bakhmut has fallen. And why did he fall? We defeated everyone. It is impossible to miss such news. It is better to tell the truth in a veiled way. It is possible, but not such that they have a little bit left until the end of the month, and they will fall down. Because a number of our reliable sources, including me, have informed you that the main forces in the Avdeevka direction have not yet been engaged by the enemy. The enemy expects to enter the operational space. The most important task is to prevent what he is trying to implement. This is if we talk about the fact. Therefore, it is better to re-evaluate and prepare for the difficult. As Siersky himself once said, it is better to overestimate, but in no case underestimate the enemy. This is my opinion. Moving on. Georgievka. Active fighting continues in the eastern part of the settlement. Probably, we will talk in general. Let's follow the Kurakovsky direction. We have active military operations in the west, southwest of Mariinka. Here, the enemy attacks in the direction of victory, in the direction, which means that a number of fortifications, or rather supports along the fields and so on, it is possible to repel most of the attacks today in this area, well, including Georgievka itself. In other words, a number of attacks were repulsed, but here they acted in small infantry groups, but did not succeed, which is actually very, very good, because we must understand that the attacks that are from Marinka, that is southwest to the west, they also have a distracting character in this sector of the front. Active military operations continue in Novomikhailivka with varying success, so we do not note any changes. Somewhere it is possible to push the Russian troops, somewhere they run back into the building. In general, the situation remains quite dynamic. I think at best, we will see more or less the picture within 48 hours, because there are a lot of strikes on neighboring areas now, naturally. I repeat, they are distracting in nature, and this is a very big bet on the part of the enemy. Not only that, active hostilities are also taking place north of Novomikhailivka, but also south of Novomikhailivka. And the Vasilyevsky direction is the last one. We somehow already commented on it a week and a half ago. Then we added clarifications, the positions of the APU improved, and today there is additional information. From the Russian side, fresh footage on the situation was published. It means that the APU has reached the tip of the beam, as reported by the enemy. Well, actually this information is true, so we note the advance of the APU in this sector of the front. The situation for yesterday, the situation for today. On a front section with a width of up to 650 meters, the advance to 800 meters was. Well, we still have a gray zone at the tip of the beam, but this is not the first time we see the APU positions here, because about 2.5 or 3 months ago, we also discussed this area and counterattacked, then Russian troops were knocked out. We then added a gray zone, talked about clarifying, and as we can see, the Russian troops did not restore this position, it remained in the gray zone. Therefore, the fighting continues. As for the Orekhovsky sector of the front, we do not record any new changes, but I will tell you, there is quite a lot of activity on both sides. Naturally, we cannot say that the initiative